The law office of Patterson and Associates sat on the third floor of a building that smelled like old paper and broken dreams. Anne Whitmore, 41 years old and 3 months behind on rent, sat in an uncomfortable chair next to her daughter Iara, who was 17 and hadn't spoken to her in 2 days. The funeral had been yesterday. Bernadeth Whitmore, Anne's mother, Iara's grandmother, had died at 78 after a stroke that took her in her sleep. Quick, painless, the kind of death people call a blessing when they're trying to make themselves feel better about not visiting more often. Across the mahogany desk sat William Patterson, a state attorney, with reading glasses that kept sliding down his nose and a manila folder thick with documents that probably represented more organization than Anne had managed in her entire life. "Thank you both for coming," William said, his voice carrying the practiced sympathy of someone who did this twice a week. "I know this is a difficult time." Anne glanced at Iara, who was staring at her phone with the intensity of someone trying to disappear into a screen. They'd driven 6 hours from Denver to Asheville, North Carolina for this. 6 hours of silence broken only by gas station stops and the occasional sigh that could have meant anything. "Let's begin," William continued, opening the folder. "Bernadeth's estate is relatively straightforward. She had approximately $42,000 in savings, a 2008 Honda Civic, and several personal items of nominal value." Anne felt Iara shift beside her. 42,000. Split between Anne and her 2 brothers, that would be maybe 14,000 each. Enough to catch up on rent, maybe fix the car, maybe survive another 6 months of barely making it. The savings and vehicle will be divided equally among her 3 children, Anne, James, and Michael. Additionally, James receives the coin collection your mother maintained for 30 years, valued at approximately $18,000. Anne's jaw tightened. Of course James got the coins. The golden child who'd visited every Sunday, who'd helped with groceries, who'd been everything Anne had been too broke and exhausted to be. Michael receives the antique furniture from the main house, which has been appraised at approximately $22,000. And there it was. James got coins. Michael got furniture. Anne got... And to my daughter Anne and my granddaughter Iara, I leave the mountain property located at 4127 Black Ridge Road, approximately 40 miles northwest of Asheville, including the cabin and surrounding 12 acres. Silence. Anne stared at William, waiting for more. That was it? A cabin? She didn't even know her mother owned property in the mountains. "I'm sorry," Anne said slowly. "A cabin? What cabin?" William shuffled through papers. "According to the deed, your mother purchased the property in 1987. It's been unoccupied for approximately 23 years. There are back taxes owed, roughly $8,000, but ownership transfers to you and Iara jointly upon settlement of the estate." Iara finally looked up from her phone. "Wait, Grandma owned a cabin and never told anyone?" "Apparently so. I have keys here and GPS coordinates. The property is quite remote. No immediate neighbors. The cabin itself was built in the 1950s, so it may require some maintenance." Anne felt something cold settle in her stomach. Remote. Unoccupied for 23 years. Requiring maintenance. This wasn't an inheritance. This was a liability. "Can we sell it?" Anne asked bluntly. "Certainly, though given its condition and location, finding a buyer may take time. The real estate market in that particular area is..." William paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Limited. So we got a shack in the woods that nobody wants," Iara said, her first full sentence in 48 hours. "Great, that's perfect." "There is one other thing," William added, pulling out a sealed envelope. "Your mother left specific instructions that this letter be given to you only after you'd visited the property. She was quite insistent about that." Anne took the envelope. Her mother's handwriting on the front. For Anne and Iara. Open only at the cabin. The drive back to Denver was longer than the drive out. Anne kept glancing at the envelope tucked in the visor, wondering what her mother, a woman who'd never been particularly warm or communicative in life, had felt compelled to say in death. 3 days later, eviction notice taped to their apartment door. Anne made a decision. "We're going to the cabin," she told Iara, who was packing what little they owned into garbage bags. What? Mom? No. We need to find another apartment. I need to finish school. With what money? Anne interrupted. Rent here is $2,000 a month. We have $14,000 that won't arrive for weeks, and $8,000 of it goes to back taxes on property we already own. We can stay at the cabin for free while we figure things out. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's shelter. It's ours. And right now, that's more than we have here. Iara stared at her mother with the particular blend of fury and helplessness that only teenagers can perfect. I hate this. I hate all of this. I know, baby. I know. They left Denver on a gray Tuesday morning in April, everything they owned crammed into Anne's dying Toyota. The GPS led them deeper and deeper into North Carolina mountains, paved roads giving way to gravel, gravel giving way to dirt, until finally they turned onto what was barely a driveway and saw it, the cabin. It was worse than Anne had imagined. Single story, wood siding that had gone from brown to gray, windows so dirty they were nearly opaque. The roof sagged in the middle like a broken back. Weeds had reclaimed what might have once been a yard, and a rusted metal chair sat on the porch like a skeleton of hospitality. Oh my God, Iara whispered. We're going to die here. We're not going to die. It's just old. They approached slowly, like the cabin might collapse if startled. The porch steps creaked ominously. The door was locked, but William's key worked, and the door swung open with a sound like a dying animal. Inside was not as bad as outside. Dusty, yes. Musty, absolutely. But structurally sound. There was a living room with an ancient couch, a kitchenette with a wood stove, 2 small bedrooms, and a bathroom that might have been state-of-the-art in 1962. But what dominated the living room, what was impossible to miss, was the painting. It hung above the fireplace, enormous and completely out of proportion with the space. 6 feet wide, 4 feet tall, in a heavy wooden frame that looked like it weighed more than Iara. The painting itself depicted a single bull, massive and black, standing in a field under storm clouds. The style was realistic but unsettling, the bull's eyes seeming to follow them as they moved. That's creepy, Iara said. Anne had to agree. The painting didn't fit. Everything else in the cabin was humble, practical, worn. But this painting was expensive, professional, wrong. Why would Grandma have something like this? Iara moved closer, studying it. She never even mentioned this place. Anne pulled out the sealed envelope, broke the wax seal, and read her mother's letter aloud. Anne and Iara, if you're reading this, you've come to the cabin. Good. There are things you need to understand. Things I should have told you years ago but didn't have the courage. Look behind the bull. The truth has been waiting for you there since before you were born. I'm sorry for everything. Bernadeth. Mother and daughter looked at each other, then at the painting. Behind the bull, Anne repeated. Iara was already reaching for the frame. Help me. Together they lifted. The painting was impossibly heavy, and getting it off the wall required both of them straining. As it came free, something fell from behind it, hitting the floor with a thud. A leather journal. Old, bound with a cord, pages yellowed and brittle. And carved into the wall behind where the painting had been, someone had etched words deep into the wood. The bull knows what we buried, forgive me. Anne picked up the journal with shaking hands. The first page bore a date. June 14th, 1987. The same year her mother had bought this property. The same year Anne had turned 15. The same year her father had disappeared. She opened to the first entry and began to read. What she found would shatter every memory she'd ever had of her childhood, her parents, and the grandmother she'd thought she'd known. The bull in the painting wasn't art. It was a confession. And the secret it had been hiding for 37 years was about to destroy everything. Anne's hands trembled as she opened the journal to the first entry. The handwriting was her mother's, younger, steadier than the shaky script of her final years, but unmistakably Bernadeth's. June 14th, 1987. I bought the cabin today. Paid cash. Money William doesn't know about. Money he can never know about. This place will be my insurance, my sanctuary, my burden. I can't tell anyone, especially not Anne. She's 15 now, still asking questions about her father. I tell her the same story. He's gone, we have to move forward, we'll be okay without him. She cries. I hold her, and I carry the weight of what I know. The truth is in the field, 200 yards north of the cabin. Something I buried that should never be found. James helped me, though he doesn't know what it really was. He was only 12. I told him it was important family documents I wanted to preserve. He believed me. Children always trust their mothers. Iara was reading over Anne's shoulder, her breath catching. Grandma buried something? What does that mean? Anne flipped to the next entry. June 20th, 1987. I commissioned the bull painting today. Found an artist in Asheville who doesn't ask questions when you pay extra. I told him I wanted a memorial to my husband's obsession. He thought I was creating a tribute. He was wrong. The bull was William's dream, that black Angus he bought from a ranch in Texas Sovereign. He spent our savings on that animal. Believed it would make us wealthy. Spent more time planning breeding programs than he did with his own family. The bull died 3 months before William did. Heart failure, the veterinarian said. Something genetic that couldn't be fixed. William took it as a personal failure. Started drinking more. Started shouting more. Started breaking things. I need to remember what that obsession cost us. The painting will hang over what's hidden. A reminder, a warning that only I can read. Grandma's husband, Iara whispered. Your dad, Grandpa William. She's writing about him. Anne felt her throat tighten. Keep reading. July 3rd, 1987. James is asking questions. Why do we never visit the mountain property? Why did we bury things there? I bought him a bicycle to distract him. It worked. Michael is too young to remember anything. He was only 6 when everything changed. Anne is the problem. She's observant. She notices inconsistencies. Yesterday she asked why we don't have any photos of her father from his final year. I said they were lost in a move. Another deflection on top of the others. The truth is I destroyed them all. Every single one. Because they showed what I didn't want to see. The changes in him, the person he was becoming, the fear that was growing in our home. Anne stopped reading. Her vision blurred. Changes? What changes? Iara grabbed the journal and scanned ahead rapidly. Mom, there's more. Look, August 17th, 1987. I dream about that night, April 3rd. It replays in my mind like a film I can't turn off. William came home from the barn, devastated because Sovereign had died that morning. He'd spent $20,000 on that bull, money we didn't have, money borrowed against the house. He'd believed that animal would revolutionize everything, make us wealthy. Instead, it died within 3 weeks of a genetic condition the veterinarian said was untreatable. He drank that night, more than I'd ever seen. Then came the shouting, accusations that I'd never supported his dreams, that I'd sabotaged him somehow, that everything wrong in his life was my fault. The children were awake. Anne was crying in her room. James came downstairs begging his father to stop, and then William just collapsed. One moment he was standing there, red-faced and furious. The next he was on the floor. Heart attack, the doctors said later. Massive and instantaneous. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. But in those terrible minutes while we waited, while James and I tried to help him, while Anne screamed for me to do something, I made a choice that would haunt me forever. Iara's hand covered her mouth. Oh my God, Grandpa William died of a heart attack. While arguing with Grandma, Anne said slowly, pieces falling into place. But why bury something? Why the secret? If it was a natural death... Keep reading, Iara urged. September 2nd, 1987. The official story is simple. William Whitmore died of a sudden cardiac event on April 3rd, 1987. The death certificate says natural causes. The funeral was well attended. People said kind things about a man they didn't really know. And I let them. I let everyone believe he was a good husband, a devoted father, a man taken too soon by tragic chance. But I know what the doctors didn't find. I know about the medication he'd been taking, pills he got from somewhere, pills he thought would help him perform better, work harder, be stronger, pills that probably strained his heart beyond what it could handle. I found the bottles after he died, hidden in the barn. Empty prescription bottles with someone else's name on them, evidence of something he'd been doing that I'd been too afraid to confront him about. I took those bottles. I buried them in the field along with his financial records, the debt he'd hidden, the fraudulent loan applications, the forged signatures. Evidence that would have destroyed any insurance payout, that would have left us with nothing. I buried the truth to protect my children's future, to protect the small amount of money that would keep us housed and fed. James helped me dig. My 12-year-old son, thinking we were burying important family documents as I'd told him. He doesn't know he helped me hide evidence that could have invalidated every penny of William's life insurance. He doesn't know I committed fraud by omission, by hiding what the doctors should have known. Anne closed the journal, her hands shaking. She hid evidence. From the insurance company, from the doctors. If they'd known about the medication, about the stress, about the drinking, they wouldn't have paid, Iara finished. The life insurance. That's how you guys survived after he died, right? The payout? $75,000, Anne whispered, remembering. Mom said it was the only thing William did right, maintaining his life insurance policy. We lived on that money for years. It paid for the house, for food, for everything. But if the insurance company had known he was taking unprescribed medication, that he'd been drinking heavily, that his death might have been partially caused by his own actions, they could have denied the claim, investigated it. We would have lost everything. Iara sat heavily on the dusty couch. So Grandma buried the evidence, the pill bottles, the financial records showing he was in debt, anything that would make the insurance company look closer at how he died. Anne flipped through more pages, scanning frantically. October 15th, 1987. The painting arrived today. It's exactly what I asked for. Terrible and perfect. The bull's eyes look like William's did in those final months. Obsessed, desperate, unbalanced. I had the artist add storm clouds because that's how it felt, like our whole world was collapsing. I hung the painting over the wall where I'd carved my confession into the wood. Then I sealed this journal inside the frame. Someday, maybe someone will find it. Maybe they'll understand why I did what I did. Maybe they'll judge me for it. Probably both. Anne closed the journal and sat beside her daughter. 37 years. Her mother had carried this secret her entire adult life, had built their survival on an insurance payout she'd obtained through deliberate omission, had let Anne grow up believing her father was a good man taken by tragic chance, when the reality was far more complicated. What do we do? Iara asked quietly. I don't know. The insurance fraud. The statute of limitations has to be expired by now, right? This was almost 40 years ago. Probably. But if we report it, if we tell anyone, it could still cause problems. Investigations. Questions about Mom's estate. About where the money went. But Grandpa William's medication bottles are buried in the field. That's evidence of... what? Using someone else's prescription? That's illegal too, isn't it? It was. He's been dead for 37 years. I don't think anyone's going to prosecute a dead man. They sat in silence, the journal between them. Outside, the mountain afternoon was shifting toward evening. Finally, Iara spoke. Grandma left this for you because she wanted you to know the truth. Not to report it, not to fix it, just to understand why things were the way they were. She wanted me to forgive her. Do you? Anne looked at her daughter, 17 years old, too young to understand the impossible choices desperate mothers make, but old enough to recognize that survival sometimes requires compromise. I don't know yet, but I think I understand why she did it. 3 kids, no money, a husband who'd gambled everything on a bull that died. She protected us the only way she knew how. By hiding the truth. By hiding evidence that would have destroyed us. Iara stood, walked to the window. Are we going to dig it up, the bottles and documents? Anne considered. Maybe, eventually. But not tonight. Tonight we just process this. Figure out what it means. It means Grandma wasn't perfect. No, it means she was human, and she did what she had to do to keep her family alive. They decided to stay at the cabin, partly because they had nowhere else to go, partly because Anne felt like she owed it to her mother to understand this place, this sanctuary where Bernadeth had hidden her greatest secret. As darkness fell, they sat together on the porch, looking out at the field where prescription bottles and financial fraud had been buried for longer than Iara had been alive. Behind them, through the cabin window, the bull painting watched with knowing eyes. A memorial not to an animal, but to the obsession that had destroyed a man and forced a woman to choose between honesty and survival. And Anne realized that sometimes the hardest inheritances aren't property or money. They're the secrets of the people we loved, and the choice of whether to keep them buried or bring them into the light. 3 days passed before Anne and Iara decided to dig. They spent those days making the cabin livable, sweeping decades of dust, fixing the water pump, discovering that the wood stove still worked if you knew how to coax it. Iara found an old transistor radio that picked up one station from Asheville, mostly static, but enough to feel less isolated. Anne drove 40 minutes to the nearest town for supplies, using precious money they didn't have for food and basic necessities. But every evening they'd sit on the porch and stare at the northern field, knowing what was buried there, knowing they couldn't leave without seeing it for themselves. On the 4th morning, Anne borrowed shovels from a neighbor's abandoned shed half a mile down the mountain. Iara brought rope and a tarp, things she said they'd need, though neither really knew what they were doing. 200 yards north, Anne read from the journal again. She marked it somehow. Said there'd be a sign. They walked slowly through overgrown grass, pushing through brush that hadn't been cleared in decades. The forest was reclaiming the field, nature erasing evidence of human activity one season at a time. Then Iara stopped. "Mom, look." 3 rocks, stacked deliberately in a cairn that was too purposeful to be natural. Moss-covered, settled deep into the earth, but unmistakably placed by human hands. "This is it," Anne whispered. They began to dig. The soil was soft from recent rain, which made it easier but messier. Anne's muscles burned within 20 minutes. She wasn't built for manual labor, hadn't exercised in years beyond walking to her car. Iara was younger, stronger, but unused to this kind of work. They took turns, 10 minutes each, while the other rested. 2 feet down, Anne's shovel hit something. Not solid, but resistant. Fabric. "Stop," she said, suddenly terrified. What if she was lying in the journal? What if it's not bottles? What if... "It's not a body," Iara said firmly, though her voice shook. "Grandma said what it was. She wouldn't lie about that, not in her confession." Anne knelt and carefully cleared soil with her hands. The fabric was canvas, old and deteriorated. Inside, the shape of bottles. She pulled one free, brushed dirt away. A prescription bottle. Faded orange plastic, label barely legible. The name on it. Michael Thornton. Not William Whitmore. Someone else's prescription, Iara breathed. Just like she said. They dug more carefully now, extracting bottles one by one. 7 total. All different names. All medications Anne didn't recognize. Below the bottles, wrapped in plastic that had partially degraded, were documents. Financial statements showing loans William had taken, applications with signatures that didn't quite match, evidence of a man desperately trying to save a failing dream. Anne sat back in the dirt, surrounded by her father's secrets. He was buying pills illegally, taking medication meant for other people, probably stimulants, things to help him work longer hours, think he could outwork his failures. And it killed him, Iara said. The stress, the pills, the drinking. His heart just gave out. If the insurance company had known, if the doctors had run toxicology and found these medications, your family would have gotten nothing. 3 kids and a single mom with nothing. Anne carefully rewrapped the items, placed them back in the ground. We're not taking them. We're not reporting them. This stays buried. Mom, are you sure? I mean, shouldn't someone know... Know what? That a man who died 37 years ago was taking unprescribed medication? That a widow hid evidence to feed her children? Who does it help to reveal that now? Iara was quiet, then nodded slowly. Okay, we leave it. They filled the hole back in, working faster now, wanting it finished. When the cairn was back in place, Anne stood and looked at the spot that had haunted her mother for decades. "I forgive you," she said quietly to the air, to her mother's memory, to the ghost of choices made in desperation. "I understand why you did it, and I forgive you." Iara took her mother's hand. "Do you think Uncle James knows? That he helped bury this?" "I don't think so. He was 12. Mom told him it was documents. He probably barely remembers." Anne paused. "And I'm not going to tell him. Some secrets protect the people we love. Mom understood that. Now I do too." They walked back to the cabin as afternoon shifted to evening. The bull painting was waiting, watching, guarding a confession carved in wood and hidden for nearly 4 decades. That night, Anne made a decision. They'd stay at the cabin. Not forever, but long enough. Long enough to make it a home instead of a hiding place. Long enough to transform her mother's burden into their sanctuary. Long enough to prove that sometimes the best inheritance isn't money or property. It's understanding the complicated truth about the people who came before you. She took the journal and placed it back inside the painting frame, sealing it carefully. Future generations might find it someday. Or maybe it would stay hidden for another 37 years. Either way, the truth was preserved but protected, just as her mother had intended. Outside, the mountain held its secrets. Inside, Anne and Iara began building something new on a foundation of old lies told for the right reasons. 2 weeks into their new life at the cabin, a truck appeared at the end of the driveway. Anne and Iara were on the porch, Iara doing homework from packets a sympathetic teacher had mailed, Anne reviewing job applications on her dying laptop connected to spotty internet. The sound of an engine was so unexpected that they both froze. The truck was old, a faded blue Ford that looked like it had been driving these mountain roads for decades. A man climbed out, late 60s, weathered face, wearing work clothes that had seen better years. "Help you?" Anne called, standing defensively. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The man approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "I'm Michael Dalton. I own the property about 2 miles east. Heard Bernadeth passed. Wanted to pay respects." Anne relaxed slightly. "You knew my mother?" "Not well. She kept to herself when she came up here. But we were neighbors of sorts. She'd stop by maybe twice a year, stay a few days, then disappear again." He looked at the cabin. "Never knew why she kept this place. Seemed like a burden more than anything." "You have no idea," Anne muttered. Michael smiled sadly. "I wanted to return something. Been meaning to for years, but Bernadeth always said no. Now that she's gone." He walked back to his truck and retrieved a small wooden box. "She left this with me in 1987. Said if anything happened to her, I should give it to her daughter Anne." Anne's heart stopped. Another secret. Another reveal. She took the box with shaking hands. It was locked, but a small key was taped to the bottom. "What's in it?" Iara asked. "Don't know. Never opened it. That was the deal. I keep it safe, give it to you when the time came." Michael tipped his hat. "I'll leave you to it. If you need anything, I'm just down the mountain. Welcome to the neighborhood, such as it is." He drove away, leaving Anne and Iara staring at the box. Inside the cabin, Anne unlocked it with trembling fingers. Inside were 3 items: a photograph, a letter, and a small velvet bag. The photograph showed a young Bernadeth, maybe 30 years old, standing next to a massive black bull. Her hand rested on its side, and she was smiling. Actually smiling, something Anne had rarely seen in life. "That's Sovereign," Iara whispered. "The bull from the painting." The letter was addressed to Anne, dated April 2nd, 1987, 1 day before William's death. "Anne, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found the cabin. You've probably found the journal, too. But there's something the journal doesn't say, something I need you to understand. I loved your father once. Before the obsession, before the desperation. The bull in the painting, Sovereign, that was from better times, when William still dreamed instead of gambled, when we still believed things could work out. I commissioned the painting not as a reminder of what destroyed him, but as a memorial to who he used to be. The man I married. The man who died long before his heart stopped. Keep the painting. Remember that people are more than their worst moments. Your father was. I am. You will be too. Love, Mom. Anne's tears fell onto the paper. Iara wrapped her arms around her mother. The velvet bag contained a gold wedding ring, Bernadeth's original ring, the one she'd stopped wearing years before she died. She wanted you to remember the good parts too, Iara said softly. Not just the secrets, not just the lies, the love that existed before everything fell apart. Anne looked at the bull painting with new eyes. Not a confession, not just a hiding place. A memorial to complicated love and impossible choices. We're keeping it, she decided. The painting, the cabin, all of it. This is our home now. And for the first time in years, saying the word home didn't feel like a lie. 6 months later, the cabin was unrecognizable. Anne had found work at a small accounting firm in Asheville, a 40-minute commute she made 4 days a week. Iara had enrolled in the local high school, smaller than her Denver school but closer knit, where teachers actually knew her name. The cabin had new windows, a repaired roof, and a garden Iara had started that somehow hadn't died yet. The bull painting still hung above the fireplace, but now it felt different. Not ominous, not threatening, just a reminder of where they'd come from and what they'd survived. Uncle James visited in November, bringing Michael and their families. He stood before the painting for a long time, saying nothing. Did you know? Anne asked quietly. What we buried that day? James was silent then. I knew it was important. Knew Mom was protecting us somehow. That was enough. He looked at his sister. Did you find it? Yes. And? And I left it there, where it belongs. James nodded, relief visible. Good. Some things should stay buried. That night, the whole family gathered around the fireplace. 3 siblings, their children, spanning 3 generations. They told stories about Bernadeth, about William, mixing truth with memory until the past felt less like a wound and more like a scar that had finally healed. What will you do with this place? Michael asked. Anne looked at Iara, who smiled. We're staying. It's home now. Mom's actually good at accounting, Iara added. Who knew? And you're good at not killing plants, Anne teased. Also surprising. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Anne stood alone before the painting. She thought about her mother's letter, about love and obsession, about the difference between who we are and who we become under pressure. Thank you, she whispered to the bull, to her mother's memory, to the complicated inheritance that had brought her here. For the cabin, for the truth, for teaching me that survival sometimes requires secrets, but healing requires letting them go. She touched the frame, feeling the journal hidden inside, a time capsule of pain and protection, of desperate choices and enduring love. Some secrets she'd keep buried in the field, others she'd sealed in a painting. But the most important truth she'd learned to carry openly, that family isn't defined by perfection, but by the willingness to understand, forgive, and move forward together. The bull watched over them all, guardian of what was hidden and witness to what was found. And in the morning, Anne and Iara would wake up in the home they'd inherited. Not just property and wood, but the hard-won knowledge that the most valuable inheritance is understanding where you came from so you can choose who you'll become. At the will reading, a mother and daughter got a cabin, and behind the bull painting was a secret.